All right, hello. Finally, I got a chance to do a video reviewing the Democratic debate. I know it took me a week, but, it's just, I process things much slower than most people, all right? So I'm doing my best. But you're going to see Kathy Hochul, really show who she is in this debate. And it's more evident than ever. We're not going to watch the whole thing, but we're going to watch highlights of her. She doesn't really care about people in New York. She only cares about her own. She's really came across as extremely snobby. You'll see.
So glad to have you with us tonight. We're looking forward to a robust debate, and we want to thank the candidates for being here. Public Advocate Suozzi Williams, Governor Kathy Hochul, and Congressman Tom Suozzi.
Look at her face.
We also want to thank our partners, News Radio 880, for co-sponsoring tonight's debate. Before we begin, just a few things to mention. Podium positions have all been selected at random. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to our questions.
And by the way, the link is in the description below. You can watch the whole debate. I've already shared it, I believe, on my... We also have it on YouTube, and I'm watching it on their website.
Now, all that being said, we're going to get right into it. First question for you tonight, Mr. Williams. In light of all the mass shootings and with the Supreme Court poised to overturn...
And let me just say that Mr. Williams has a disability. That's why you're going to see him. He has Tourette's. Even though I don't really support him in this race because he does care about people. He's genuine. And I have a lot of respect for him because he has disability and he's not letting it stop him. He's very strong for that. And I really appreciate that. Even though I'm not going to be voting for him and I'll be voting for Tom Suozzi. He's still better than Hochul.
Turn all or part of New York's century-old law prohibiting people from carrying guns without a permit. What steps are you prepared to take to prevent our city and state from becoming the Wild Wild West?
Thank you so much for having us today, and thank you for that question. It's a hard question to answer in 60 seconds, but I'm public advocate of the city of New York. I've been working on these issues for over a decade. And just let me tell you something that I know. When I saw the bill signing yesterday, and it's already a commercial now, it reminded me of the Cuomo press conferences during the pandemic.
Yep.
And I'll tell you why. It was in the middle of the Bronx that has some of the highest shootings that we've seen. Unfortunately, those bills that were signed primarily deal with mass shootings. And we have told the Bronx that we've dealt with the street crime that they are dealing with every single day. The one bill that may have dealt with street crimes is micro-stamping. We have asked for that for over 10 years. I wish we could have had the support of the governor. And why
Look
that
at her
bothers
face.
me is because this is not theoretical for me. This is not esoteric. We have to deal with the real street violence. And in between those press conferences, death is happening.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Ms.
Exactly.
We are prepared to address the situation where we anticipate the Supreme Court to overturn a law that's been on the books in the state of New York for nearly 100 years. Literally this afternoon, I convened my policy team as well as working with every town and other advocates to come up with the different scenarios. I will tell you within hours of that Supreme Court decision, we will have a response. I've already spoken to the leaders of the Assembly and the Senate about the possibility of even bringing them back for an extraordinary session in order to address this. We cannot have a situation where people can literally carry a gun into subways, into grocery stores with reckless abandon. And
But she doesn't get it that it's not just the guns that's hurting people. Plenty of people getting pushed in front of subways, stabbed. It's the dangerous people that need to be behind bars. But that's not something that she gets.
The Supreme Court doesn't do that, but we're ready here in New York to take action to protect the people of the state. That is our #1 responsibility, so we're ready. And the press conference yesterday, yes, we got so much done that had been hampered and unfulfilled for a decade, and I'm really proud we were able to get that over the finish line, again, to protect New Yorkers from gun violence in grocery stores or on the streets of Brooklyn or the Bronx or Harlem.
Mr. Suozzi.
You know, there's a crime crisis and a gun crisis here in New York, and people are suffering every single day.
That's right. He is the best
The
response.
governor talks about making crime and guns a priority, but 69% of New Yorkers say that she's failing on crime.
Yep, exactly.
She talks about crime, but she didn't address the issue of bail reform.
Exactly.
Even worse, when the governor was a member of Congress, she voted with, was endorsed by, and took money from the NRA. Where's the principle in that? I'm a proven executive. I'm trained as a CPA and attorney. I was the mayor of my hometown. I was the county executive of Nassau County. I've been a member of Congress for the past 5.5 years, where I have an F rating from the NRA and co-sponsor every piece of gun violence prevention legislation. I will fight crime as my #1 priority, address the gun crisis we're facing here in New York State. I'll cut taxes, I'll help our troubled schools, and I'll go after the corruption that the Washington Post called Make New York State the most corrupt state in the United States of America. There's a big difference between making a speech and passing legislation and actually getting things done. I can do it because I've done it.
I'd like to rebut that.
Just 15 seconds.
No governor has done more in less time than I have to address gun violence. And I'll address that NRA situation.
Right.
That was a decade ago. Judging what I've done, because a lot of people have evolved since I took that position. You know what we need? More people to evolve. We have to change the hearts and minds of people all over this country so we can finally have common sense legislation from Washington.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hochul. We're going to move on.
Mayor, this is important because 10 years ago, I wrote my first report on how to deal with gun violence while the governor was touting her A rating for the NRA.
Yep.
I wish we had her support. So in between that decade of death, we might have gotten where we are today. We are 10 years behind because people in Congress were doing the bidding of the NRA. And what happened yesterday will do nothing for the 25 people that died in Buffalo on top of the 10 people who were massacred for 6 months.
And I'll only take 15. I'll only take 15
Excuse me, the next
seconds.
question is for the governor, Mr. Suozzi. Governor Hochul, the man accused of killing the Goldman Sachs researcher on the Q train is an example of someone with a long rap sheet who was freed after a judge denied a request for $15,000 bail and instead set $1. Many charge that if New York had allowed judges to consider dangerousness like 49 other states,
we're the
he wouldn't
only
have been on
state
the
that
streets,
doesn't.
and maybe Daniel Enriquez might still be alive. Why didn't you use the considerable powers of the governor to veto budget items and bills near and dear to the heart of the lawmakers to enact a dangerousness statute?
Listen to her excuse.
That crime was heartbreaking to know that people are living in that kind of fear, and that is why we did address this. And I'll tell you something about bail reform, though. The fundamental premise behind bail reform, the change of it, was needed. We had a dual system where two people accused of the same offense. One would go to Rikers, and one could go back home, usually based on the color of their skin. But when I see
here we go. Here she is race baiting again. Like she cares about minorities. Meanwhile, it's minorities that are dealing with the brunt of the crime rate. She doesn't care about minorities. She only cares about her own preppy white kind.
I jump into it. That's what we did in my budget. And what we did on bail reform, we came up with more standards than judges have ever had in the last few years since it was changed. They can now look at past history, the seriousness of the crime, whether or not there was an order of protection before, whether or not a gun was used. So we gave the power for judges to analyze this and look at it differently than
but
they
they
had
still
been
can't
before we
consider
made those
dangerousness.
changes.
But Governor, do you regret that you couldn't get dangerousness as part of the
She wouldn't answer
part
the
of
question.
reforms?
What I just described gives the judges discretion to analyze
won't answer it.
more
Look at her face.
specificity than just the word dangerousness is subjective. I said, do they have an order of protection? Is there a history of gun use? Is there the severity of the crime? So I think what we gave the judges is better than this vague term that can be subjective and many times used against an individual because of the color of their skin.
Here we go again.
We don't need to go backwards. We need to go forward in a thoughtful way, but we're not compromising either.
Nothing to do with the
justice
color
or
of the
safety.
skin.
Mr. Suozzi.
I 100% support giving judges the discretion to consider dangerousness of the defendants who come before them, as you mentioned, Marcia, the same as it is in 49 other states in the United States of America. The governor says she cares about crime, she wants to address crime, but she does nothing to fix bail reform. It's hard to imagine that this governor can continue to say that she cares about crime, but 69% of New Yorkers say she's failing on crime. She says she jumps right in. Well, when it came to the Buffalo Bills Stadium, she got something done that nobody thought could get done. It's so unpopular. It's $1 billion, the most lucrative deal in the history of the NFL. She got that done. She twisted arms. But when it came to bail reform, she didn't engage. When it came to so many other issues that are important to New Yorkers, like enforcing and implementing the red flag law, she didn't engage. It goes on and on with examples of where you can just talk about something, but it's very different to actually get something done. That's why it matters if you're a proven executive who has a proven record of getting things done.
Mr. Williams.
Terea Starnes, Jeffrey Whitehead, Dominic Sylvester. Those are people who were in my high school in the 90s who died from gun violence. A bullet went through my mother's car door while it was parked in front of her home. These are not theoretical things for me. These are personal. This is not esoteric. This is why I spent the better part of my career actually finding out what stops gun violence. And so when we asked for $1 billion to be put into the budget to address the type of gun violence that the bills that were signed would never address, it would not have protected Daniel, that strap hanger who was going to get brunch on a subway. It would have not have stopped 11-year-old Kiera from being shot.
Why do you think it wouldn't have stopped the gunman who attacked the guy on the Q train? Why?
Well, dangerousness, I have to tell you, I have to remind folks, as you mentioned, it's in 49 other states. Many of those states have cities whose gun violence is worse than us. That's why you need a governor who has spent their life working on figuring out how to stop the gun violence. I'm proud of the leadership that we took.
So you're against the dangerousness.
But I want to be clear. I'm proud of the leadership that I took.
But he gets it more than the governor.
The governor was supported by the NRA from 2012 to 2018 to help this city become the safest it has ever been. That research, that work that we've done is what I want to take to Albany. From Brooklyn to Buffalo, people are dealing with gun violence in a way that we haven't dealt with in a very long time. It's important to have someone that understands just the press conferences, like Andrew Cuomo did while people were dying due to the pandemic, will not stop people from dying. I'm tired of going from press conference to funeral.
Marcia, I need to address that, please.
Please.
Look at the look on her
purpose of
face.
the press conference, gathering people.
This
was to
woman is so
stick a pen
arrogant and snobby.
sign into law 10 bills that no one had ever undertaken before. You mentioned microstepping took a decade. I've been the governor for 9 months. I got it done in record time. I made sure that we have resources to go to community violence disruption programs, tripling the amount of money, so we can get at root causes, but also give the tools to law enforcement to do their jobs. Banning ghost guns, banning guns that defy description. You should see some of these weapons that we're seizing. And you know why we're seizing them? Because I told our state police to work for the first time ever with 9 other states, put together a consortium, and stop the illegal guns from flowing from Georgia and Tennessee and Pennsylvania into our streets.
I'm sorry, that microstamping bill doesn't take effect for 4 years. People were being shot in the next 4 years while we wait for that microstamping bill.
And let me just say one thing, if I can. All three of us up here support.
15 seconds, Mr. Suozzi.
All three of us up here support the gun legislation that's been passed. It's great, it's wonderful, it's fantastic. Only one of us standing up here has ever been endorsed by the NRA, taken money from the NRA.
Okay, we're going to move on.
We're going to
be Kathy
on.
Hochul.
Thank you all. Mr. Suozzi, this is for you. What do you have to say about the House ethics probe into charges that you failed?
All right, I'm going to skip over this because this is BS.
I worked hard to structure the best
Stocks
deal I
probe.
could, the benefit of the taxpayers in negotiating that.
They're talking about the Buffalo Stadium
There is
deal.
no connection between this company that does
She's full of it. I mean,
concessions. They literally sell beer and hot dogs at the games. They had nothing to do with the
look
negotiation.
at the look in her face. Do you trust that woman?
$1 billion to be put in for gun violence prevention. What we got was $1 billion for a billionaire stadium that hired her husband outside of Buffalo.
I'll tell you, I'm impressed with him too, even though he's a little more to the left.
We dealt with some bills that
I think maybe he would have been a better mayor than Eric Adams.
But I want to go back to the money that she said she was put in. It was $18 million. That's not even $1 million per county. We need to have someone that's going to stop the budget to say we need more money for gun violence prevention, not a billionaire to get a stadium to be built outside of Buffalo where people are suffering.
Mr. Suozzi.
You know, New Yorkers had such high hopes when the governor took office, and she pledged to make it the most ethical, the most transparent government in the history of New York State. And that simply hasn't happened. That's why we see the Siena poll, how disappointed New Yorkers are.
Exactly.
This issue with her husband being the general counsel to Delaware North. Delaware North sells $11 beers to people. It costs you so much to buy a ticket there. And yet,
that's corruption for
we're
you.
asking taxpayers to put up $1 billion to subsidize this stadium. That's the biggest taxpayer giveaway in the history of the NFL. And even worse, it was announced 4 days before the budget was due. A budget process that Blair Horner from NYPIRG said was the most secretive budget process he's ever seen in the 30 years he's been in Albany. And they announced it 4 days before the budget was due, and there was no public hearing whatsoever.
Governor, did you want to respond?
I structured a deal that was the best we could do for the taxpayers of New York, and here's what we accomplished. That stadium will be more than paid for. The tax revenues derived from the income as well as the economic benefit. We did a study in advance. It'll far exceed the investment of the state.
I can't stand her.
Her husband.
She's just awful.
To avoid
that has not been.
Now let's
group of
go to this.
History.
Governor getting arrested, a hand-picked lieutenant governor, 5 years. They said you have to file periodic transaction reports as well every 45 days.
So they changed the rules
when
basically on
we
him.
did it. It's a paperwork thing.
To report stuff. It's a paperwork thing. All right, that's what
Hochul
Hochul did was much worse.
Outside of Buffalo, where people are suffering.
Critically important in an area like Western New York. But
given that the legislature has approved 3 casino licenses for downstate.
Go past the casinos here.
Congestion pricing, but not now in the middle of this financial crisis we're facing. And why are people not coming back to New York? They're not coming back to New York to their offices because they're afraid. They're afraid to take the subways. People are.
Let me back this up a little bit.
Central business district of the city are actually here. Given those low numbers, does enacting congestion pricing right now in the next few months, does that make sense, or should it be postponed in the interest of economic recovery?
It should be postponed for at least a year.
I agree with that.
I'm a big supporter of congestion pricing. I actually talked about it back in 2006 before Mayor Bloomberg even talked about it. I support congestion pricing, but not now in the middle of this financial crisis we're facing. And why are people not coming back to New York? They're not coming back to New York to their offices because they're afraid. They're afraid to take the subways. People are scared. Well, I just saw in the news tonight of a man throwing a woman onto the train tracks. It's terrifying. 91% of New Yorkers say that crime is a serious or a very serious issue. 74% say they're afraid they're going to be the victim of a violent crime. We saw the cops getting killed. We saw this 11-year-old girl getting shot. We saw this Mr. Enriquez getting shot on his way to work on a Sunday morning. I was with a bunch of mothers the other day who all lost their kids to crime and gun violence. Bodegas are getting robbed on a regular basis. Crime is the #1 issue that we face in the state right now, and I have a 15-point plan to address it. Not just bail reform, but addressing mental health and helping our schools.
Yeah,
and helping
he's talking
kids.
about mental health, and that's very
congestion
important.
Pricing, should it happen now or later?
You'll hear more later.
I support congestion pricing, but we've been in negotiations with the federal government that has the say on the next step, and they have now
she
put
won't give
some
an
other,
answer, of course.
I would call them hurdles in the way that we have to overcome. So this is not going to happen over the next year under any circumstances. But now is not the right time. We are working very hard. It's like the reason I didn't raise prices on the subways. I said we're trying to encourage people to
we're
use
supposed to
a service,
appreciate that you
trying
didn't
to
raise
sell a
prices on the
product in a
subway.
sense.
But you
So we
probably will in the
actually,
future.
Found more ways to have
Well, Phil
Metro
Murphy's kept
cards
the
that
fares
give
and
people
NJ
bigger
Transit the
discounts
same for
every single
years.
day. They use it over the course of a week or a month. So we're focused on doing everything we can to encourage people to come back. But this is the post-pandemic world. We're not going to see many people come back 5 days a week. So I'm saying, and what I did today was
there you
talk
go.
about
This is the post-pandemic world. You know what she's doing with the new normal.
office conversions to residential. Today I signed a bill that allows for hotel conversions to residential.
Let's put homeless people in the city. Let's make the city more of a ghetto than it already has become.
More people who work here to be able to live in this city. And that has not been the case for a long time because of the affordability crisis, something that we're leaning
she's so
hard
full
into
of it.
and beginning to solve.
Governor Hochul, if I could
She's
just
the one that's
interrupt
going
for
to
a
force
second.
me to
Can
live in
you
New
tell us
Jersey
how
if
long
she gets
congestion
elected.
pricing is going to be delayed in New York?
I don't have the answer. We're in conversations with the federal government. They just asked us to deal with an additional environmental issue. So I don't think it's going to be before the end of this year. I'm rather certain of that. So we're asking them for a time frame, but we are on a path. And now we have to address their concerns and their flags that they've raised. So we're committed to getting it done.
Mr. Williams, congestion pricing now or delay it?
So first, the answer is we should do it now. It's something I've been supporting for a very long time, and it's important not only because of the climate, but because of the revenue we need to deal with so many issues.
You did mention the climate, though.
The reason people are not going back to work primarily is because we keep trying to go back to a normal that harmed New Yorkers. And so just like I led when it came to making the streets safer, when we went from 2012, where gun violence was out of control, to 2018 pre-pandemic, we're leading by example. What we have to do is have a hybrid remote option so people can travel back and forth to work and keep that economy going, but also realizing that they can have a better work-life balance and also help the economy around where they live. These are the things that workers are asking for. These are the things that New Yorkers are asking for. And we need a governor who's going to lead by example. I'm that governor.
Thank you.
Next question is to you, Governor Hochul. You've made a commitment to provide state emergency funds to pay for the abortions of people who come here from other states. Some question
we already have people.
Best ways to protect.
She said she
don't know how.
I face it when I'm walking in the streets of the city as well as everybody else.
New York will protect its women.
What are you going to do to protect those adults and children who don't want to be exposed to and forced to inhale marijuana smoke?
Yeah, this is a real challenge that we face. I face it when I'm walking in the streets of the city as well as everybody else does. You always smell people smoking pot when you're walking down the streets.
Except if you're in an enclave.
75% of the people in jail have a drug, alcohol, or mental health problem. We have to recognize the fact that marijuana needs to also be, when it's decriminalized and regulated, we have to make sure that people don't use it as a gateway into other drugs in the future.
How do you prevent people getting it secondhand when they don't want it?
It's very important as far as education, and it's very important as far as people can only smoke in legal locations. So you shouldn't be able to smoke out in the open air, the same as you're not allowed to drink out in the open air.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I'd like to address
I like that
concept behind the cannabis industry, and we'll get to this specific
I'm sick
question.
of smelling weeds.
I'm very proud that I was able to take steps literally weeks within the time frame of becoming governor to open up an industry that we believe is going to be beneficial for taxpayers, farmers, but also to help the communities that have been targeted for decades. The mass incarceration that
here we go again.
because of disproportionate.
You're sitting pretty in your enclaves. You don't have to see the swagger walkers, smell the weed, and deal with all the problems. She just wants more and more criminals out on the streets.
Rest of young people. We have now, in black and brown communities, we have worked hard to make sure that the licenses and the opportunities for economic benefit go to those targeted communities. But what you're talking about is important to me. I'm working with
and those communities are dealing with these quality of life issues. They're the ones seeing their quality of life go down the toilet while the whitest communities preserve and even improve their quality of life. I see it right here on Long Island.
To put together a PSA right now to talk about how we have to respect each other's space, to understand that people do not want to be inhaling, whether it's cigarette smoke or marijuana smoke. No one should have to be exposed to that. So we're working on that right now with our Commission of Health.
Smoking should be banned in all multi-tenant buildings too.
It is important. I'd say if we're talking about black and brown communities, that's where I'm from. And so I understand those same communities that have been abused by drug laws that
of course, I'm not going to agree with him on this.
Going to be legal. We have to make sure that we right that. As was mentioned, same places where you shouldn't drink, you shouldn't smoke marijuana. But we have to make sure we push this forward because it is a social justice issue. Those same communities, by the way, and I have to say this, sorry, not sorry, are dealing with gun violence. And I have to bring up the stadium because those 100 jobs will not go to East Buffalo because they have no cars or no transportation to go.
Yep.
I'm saying that because East Buffalo, I spoke to those folks, have been a transit desert, have been a food desert, something that the governor brought up when the mass shooting happened.
She hasn't done anything to help the people of East Buffalo.
The question I have is, when do we do something about it? If that is how you would treat your neighbors, if that is how you would treat a black community where you live, how are you going to treat Brooklyn, Syracuse, the Bronx, East Flatbush, Schenectady? This is important because these communities are afraid and they need someone who has provided the leadership to deal with the issues that they've been dealing with for far too long.
Mr. Williams, the next question does go to you. I'm wondering if you would endorse Bill de Blasio for congressional race if he asked you. Why or why not? And do you think he would make a good congressman?
I am running for governor. He has not asked me. I don't think he will ask me.
Tip your hand right here.
Oh, I can't.
In Congress, don't you think he could make?
I'm not going to pander to the left. I'm not going to back down to the right. And I'm looking for other common sense
Democrats won't endorse de Blasio
to run for Congress because we need to have a different conversation in our country.
So are you saying Bill de Blasio is not a common sense Democrat?
No, I don't. I think that he sometimes goes too far to the Democratic orthodoxy instead of trying to work across party lines to get things done on behalf of the people.
Governor?
I'll be weighing in the general election in these races because I'm going to be
using won't answer.
My name, my reputation, my resources to help elect Democrats to Congress all over the state of New York against Republicans in November because there's so much on the line. We have not only the Supreme Court against us, but we have so many issues like money we're waiting for child care to come for us.
But if Bill de Blasio was the nominee in that district, would you endorse him or would you just withhold your endorsement because you might have reservations about him?
I'm not getting involved in primaries.
You are running in a primary.
Next question is for you, Ms. Hochul. Should mentally ill people living on the streets and subways be removed against their will and held involuntarily until they get the humane treatment that they need?
And of course, I like Suozzi's answer.
What we did the first week Eric Adams was sworn into office, I went with him into the subway and announced that we're working in partnership. And let me put an emphasis on that. First time in a decade that a mayor and a governor have actually worked together toward solving a common problem. And we talked about how we can pull his resources, our resources, to have these support teams, not one person yanking you off the street, throwing you in a shelter and you're back again. That's inhumane and it doesn't work. So we're working together to have mental health experts, social work, and people who can help find them housing to go into where they can actually get supportive services that are long-term. Just the bill I signed today will create hundreds of more, perhaps thousands more units.
The thrust of what I'm getting at is, should they be removed against their will and be given humane treatment that they need?
It depends on the severity of the illness. If they're demonstrating that they could cause harm to themselves or other, that takes it to a different standard. One of the reforms we did in our budget as part of our comprehensive package to address public safety was to deal with Kendra's law and also to talk about the rights we have to protect ourselves as a society as well. I believe in that, respecting individual rights, getting them services, but if someone has demonstrated they could cause harm to others, then we have a responsibility to help that person get services and protect other riders or wherever situation they're in.
That's your standard, not just that they're mentally ill. Mr. Williams?
Can you please repeat the question?
Should mentally ill people living on the streets and subways be removed against their will and held involuntarily until they get the treatment that they need?
First, I do want to say I found it interesting that there'd be no endorsement in the primary. The Democratic committee has already endorsed, and I really wish the governor would say the same thing to the state committee, so there'd be no endorsement.
He calls her out a lot, too.
What I would say is most people who are mentally ill are not violent. What they need is a continuum of care. One of my first reports I put out as one of the citywide elected officials was on mental health, trying to show what we can do to create that continuum of care. I will tell you, in speaking to law enforcement, they don't want to be the ones responding. Who should be responding to people who are in acute crisis, which I think you're bringing to, are the people who have the most, have peer networks and people who have medical expertise.
But what we're getting at is people who need care.
So, but
should we take them off the street?
But we have to be careful. The last time we allowed this, it went crazy. The question is, we do have to change the law to allow some people to be involuntarily put into a place so they can get assistance. What we have to make sure is that we don't cross that threshold just willy-nilly.
Even he gets it more than the governor.
Acute mental health crisis actually may not need to be removed involuntarily if they have the right supports there at that moment in time. And so what we've found, if you can get people that are not necessarily police as a first responders, they can, peers who have dealt with this, people who have experience in doing this, can really engage with that person so they're not need to be forcibly removed. What we keep doing is mixing the worst case scenarios with most scenarios that don't happen. And again, that's why having someone who's dealt with these issues for the past decade and has put forth plans, some of which have helped us get to where we were pre-pandemic, is the type of person that you need for governor of the state of New York.
You know, I'm very passionate about this issue. When I lived in Manhattan from 1984 to 1991, when I was in law school, I used to supervise, sleep overnight at a homeless shelter. It was such a big problem back in the 80s, and we see it coming back again. There are 18.5 million people in New York State. Of those 18.5 million people, 1.5 million people have a serious mental health problem, not just anxiety, but schizophrenia, bipolar, severe depression. And so if somebody's living on the streets and it's 10 degrees out and they have a big sore on their leg and they're muttering to themselves, that person is a danger to themselves and a danger to others. And we have to give police and social workers and mental health workers and family members the ability to take those folks off the streets, to get them the humane care, so that they can take their medication, so they can get the treatment they need. We need a comprehensive plan for mental health. 75% of the people in jail have a drug, alcohol, or mental health problem. Families are scared to take their kids down the street when somebody who's mentally ill is on the street acting out. We have to address this as a real problem as it is.
Thank you.
I have to say, I have
Mr. Williams?
I have Tourette's syndrome. I remember being on an Amtrak train when I had a particular loud amounts of tics. I was almost removed from that Amtrak by someone who didn't understand what was going on. Thankfully, I was able to speak and let them know what's going on, and I wasn't removed. And that's the reason I try to take care when I'm answering these questions. Again, these things are not theoretical to me. It's not just things I read about in the paper or see on TV. These are things that I've dealt with, my family's dealt with, my constituents have dealt with. And so I try to make sure that I think about the real answers to these questions, so we don't tell people in New York that we're going to keep them safe when we're not. They want to be safe, they want to feel safe. And I have great expertise and leadership in doing that.
Mr. Williams, the New York City Council passed a law to allow people with green cards to vote in local elections. Should this be extended statewide? People with green cards allowed to vote in elections,
and
local
I'm against
elections, every place in the state.
Let's be
30 seconds. You have 30 seconds.
How do we get to 30 seconds so quick? But,
We're going to the end of the debate.
I want to be clear. Non-citizens have been voting in this country longer than they haven't been. So the city council simply restored a right that was already there. And of course, in the state, we want to make sure that everyone is civically engaged. And that includes some of our non-citizen residents who are dealing with the impacts of very bad policy.
Mr. Suozzi, 30 seconds.
I don't think the vote should be extended. I'm a very great supporter of immigrants. In 1994, I started the first day worker center anywhere on the East Coast of the United States of America when I was mayor of the city of Untitled. And when I was county executive of Nassau County, I kicked ice out of Nassau County. I was the person of the year for the New York Immigration Coalition. I'm a first-generation American. My father was born in Italy. I support immigrants. I support the undocumented to try and help them live the best life they can in the United States of America. But the right to vote should be reserved for citizens.
Governor, 30 seconds.
Specifically on the question, I respect the right of a locality to make that decision as they did in New York City, but I will not be proposing that it be extended to the entire state. But these are individuals who live among us. They have rights. That is why I worked so hard to make sure that there was over $2 billion in funding for excluded workers that no one had worked on before. We've worked on so many programs to help lift them up and make them feel part of the New York family.
Thank you, Ms. Hochul.
We
Mr.
asked for that
Suozzi.
excluded worker fund to be extended, and we couldn't get it. I just want to be clear.
Thank you. Mr. Suozzi, 30 seconds here. Should there be term limits for all elected state officials, governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, as well as assembly members and state senators?
I don't believe that there should be term limits. I think that what we should do is have more people participate in elections to hold elected officials accountable. We have the most corrupt state in the United States of America. The past 3 governors left in scandal: Schneiderman, Hevesi, Skelos, Silver, Bruno, the recent lieutenant governor arrested for bribery and corruption. We need to hold elected officials accountable. If they don't do what the people want, we need to kick them out of office.
Well, what wound up happening there was a weird power problem. We had a brownout, and certain things were not working. Just you can see there's still something on the outage map here in Mineola. Don't ask me what happened, but we had a brownout. Certain things were not working. I have a separate video on that, but I figured I'd update you on why that video kind of got messed up there toward the end. And now I kind of have to load the debate. You know what? I'm tired. All right, you got to see a good part of it there. You could see that Kathy Hochul. Let me go back to this. Let's load the debate in here. WCBS Dem debate. And we'll load it back up in here. And of course, they're going to make us sit. You know what? Let's go. Maybe it's on YouTube. I don't feel like sitting through damn commercials.
Live.
All right. I know we were talking about this, and then we were talking about the green card voters, I think, and I think
the vote should be extended. I'm a very great supporter of immigrants. In 1994, I started the first day worker center anywhere on the East Coast of the United States of America when I was mayor of the city.
But
of
he's
Untitled.
against allowing people to vote.
When I was
with
county
green
executive of
cards.
Nassau County, I kicked ICE out of Nassau County. I was the person of the year for the New York Immigration Coalition. I'm a first-generation American. My father was born in Italy. I support immigrants. I support the undocumented to try and help them live the best life they can here in the United States of America. But the right to vote should be reserved for citizens.
Yes,
30 seconds.
that's right.
Specifically on the question,
She won't
I
answer
respect the right of a locality to make that decision as they did in New York City, but I will not be proposing that it be extended to the entire state. But these are individuals who live among us. They have rights. That is why I worked so hard to make sure that there was over $2 billion in funding for excluded workers that no one had worked on before. We've worked on so many programs to help lift them up and make them feel part of the New York family.
Thank you, Ms. Hochul.
We
Mr.
asked for that
Suozzi.
excluded worker fund to be extended, and we couldn't get it.
Thank you.
So I think they spoke about
Mr.
term limits.
I need to be able to
crypto
examine
mining,
the differences, but I'm not interested.
I'm not going to talk about.
Are going to be an important first start for restoring people's faith that we will have the courage, the guts.
COVID compensation.
When I ran for
that was the
lieutenant
other
governor
subject.
Against the governor now, we said we needed a lieutenant governor who will stand up and speak out when New Yorkers were suffering. We didn't get that. During the pandemic, many people were telling me, don't speak out against the governor. He's doing great press conferences. And I said, in between those press conferences, people are dying, just like the people you just mentioned. We turned out to be correct. I wish we had someone that would stand up then, when it was hard, not when it was easy, when he was on his way out. But what we have in the Republican Party right now is, because of incumbency protection, people are getting massacred in the street. Unfortunately,
why we haven't had hearings to get to the bottom of exactly what happened here.
Yeah,
to find out what the facts actually are. I don't know why the governor has not put together a committee to look at this so we could learn lessons from what we went through. Now, I know how desperate a time New Yorkers faced back in 2020, more than any other place in the country. I remember the picture on your news programs and others of seeing people lined up in the freezing cold with the rain coming down, people coughing on each other, trying to go get a test. And there were refrigerator trucks full of bodies. We have not learned the lessons from COVID because we didn't have a comprehensive plan to address Omicron back in November.
Find out exactly what happened in the nursing home.
Do those people deserve compensation?
I gave them an apology, and I said I will look at this even further to determine what else we can do to help them.
She won't even answer it.
We're going to move on here to this final segment, and we're looking for one-word answers.
Okay, so I'm not going to play this part, but that's pretty much the debate. You can see, look at her face. I actually like this. She is such a snob. If she somehow can win this primary, this state is screwed. Because, you know, the state probably will not elect a Republican. So this is almost like the governor election, almost, all right? And there are a couple of other things that Tom Suozzi said in another debate on Pix that she was not present at, on Pix 11. He said that it's time to move on from these mandates. She won't let it go. This woman is obsessed with her own power, and God help New York State if she wins this primary. That's all I could say. The best candidate is the man on the right, Tom Suozzi. That's the best candidate. And that's who I'm going to be voting for in the Democratic Party because I am a registered Democrat. And so I will be voting for Tom Suozzi. I like what he said. He's the kind of governor that the state needs, a centrist Democrat that's going to care about the issues like crime, equality, taking care of people, and not pandering to the extreme left. All right? Kathy Hochul, she's only pandering to herself and her own snobby, preppy, white kind, all right? Suozzi Williams, he's a good guy, all right? He's a good guy, and I think, I really think that, you know what I mean? I don't think, unfortunately, I cannot vote for him as governor because of his policies, but he does care about people. There is only one person in this picture that doesn't give a crap about the average New Yorker, and that's that woman in the middle. Thank you for watching.